Well, thank you all for a really fascinating session. So much to take in from that. I'd like to ask the presenters to turn on their cameras and their microphones to be ready for questions. And I encourage everyone to check out the bios and abstracts for these presentations in the program booklet. So to start, and I will say we have a lot of questions. We may not get through them all. So be sure to, like I said, check out the bios in the program book, and maybe you'll need to reach out to the presenters directly if you have questions for them. And we're only going to do the questions that people have said they would like to answer live. A lot of questions have been answered in the chat themselves, so check those out as well. So the first question is for you, Kyle. With an interest in food patterns instead of nutrients, why is FDC not planning to map foods in FDC with the FPED data? There's no place for people to access FPED in a usable way, and it would be very useful for us to have this information.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to the different types of data that are in Food Data Central, and FPED is best associated with the FNDDS data set. So going to the Food Surveys Research Group website and accessing FPED in multiple formats through that website. We are, as I mentioned in a prior presentation, going to add a link over to it. But I think it also gets at a question of what we could take advantage of with sort of implementing ontology and taking advantage of the structure that we've done when it gets into mapping these sorts of questions in an ontology that we don't necessarily have to, at the USDA, do the groundwork of mapping to. If we do some standardization of terms and terminology, then potentially it can be more easily mapped to these other data systems.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Jaspreet. What a lot of work you've done regarding the ingredient parsing. Perhaps I missed this, but did you parse all ingredients of all entries in the branded food products database or just the food categories of interest? Are ING ID files publicly available? Two questions.
So we started off with baked products to build a prototype. And since then, we have expanded to beverages, several dairy products, mixed dishes, and so forth. Yes, our ultimate is to do the whole BFPD. And as to, is this publicly available? Right now, as we're still working on it, building on it, but we are very, very interested in talking to whoever is interested in collaborating and talking, because we can focus if there's a research interest, and we can focus on specific food categories or specific food ingredients. So please reach out to us.
Thank you. This next one is also for you. No, is also for you, I think, Kyle. Moving forward, will FDC remain available in relational format for those of us whose infrastructure is built using the relational format? If not, how would the new graph format be able to communicate with the current relational format?
Yeah, I think I should have been more clear in the presentation where we said we wanted to make sure our implementation of Graph doesn't impact existing users of Food Data Central. It is very important that we still give our historical formats forward. It's what our app users are potentially using. It's potentially what people are using into their structured databases. So we still give our CSV format, which is a structured format of pulling that in. And then we just more recently provided JSON, which is more of that sort of relational format moving forward. And I'd recommend anyone in data science get more comfortable with JSON moving forward, but we will still be providing that structured CSV format that you're used to.
Thank you for that. Jaspreet, another question for you with praise. Great work. Perhaps I missed this. How did you handle ingredients listed next to less than 2% and allergen statements? Will we see the parsed ingredient list in FDC soon?
As of now, we are treating the one with the 2%, the ones which are after the 2% statements, similarly as other ingredients. And we also found there's a lot of inconsistency in the use of the 2% statements. But in the next process that we are doing, in which we're trying to automate this process using machine learning and AI techniques, we do plan on flagging these ingredients when it is listed on the ingredient statement.
Thank you. This question's for Colin. Is metapo food publicly available? And how did you map your IDs to the FDC IDs?
Yeah, that's a good question. The goal is to have it completely publicly available. So we're just in our final cleanup stages of adding the USDA data. And then we need to work with our university to get our any legal disclaimers on it. But we're hoping in a couple months to make it publicly available. Linking to the USDA data or the FDC codes, we basically had to develop routines to parse data based on synonyms for compositional elements from multiple online databases, and then basically try to identify some QCs where we had inconsistency, and ultimately the structural details were confirmed using SMILES annotation, which tells us, it gives us spatial structural information. Once we had those established, then we just basically merged any of the common data elements that we could link to in the polyphenols databases, and then we moved on to FDC. So, and we're sharing all that data openly with the USDA. So we're hoping to have a meeting very soon. We're ready actually to give a lot of this information over. So it will all be available. I'm assuming somewhere on the USDA website, so you can get chemical identifiers with any of your compositional data. I don't know if Kyle wants to add anything in that respect, what the plan is.
No, I'll agree. I think once we meet and finalize this project, we're very interested in making sure these sort of identifiers are making it easier for people to link our data set with external data.
Amazing how much data is going to be linked together and available. Another question for you, Colin. It would seem that metapo foods would be very useful for getting at ingredients that are or may be allergens that occur in a whole bunch of different foods and other products and in the environment. Have you thought of using it in this way? For example, sialic acid in various foods and plants and dietary supplements. Very interesting talk.
Yeah, essentially, if the component's listed in an online database and is linked to food, we can get a chemical identifier. We'll be incorporating all that data. It takes a bit of time. We're actually unfunded primarily, so we're just doing this because we think it's important. So we're just, like I said, there's 5 or 6 of us, and we're just adding one database at a time, and then or incorporating one database at a time, and then making sure the data is clean and doing basic QC. So it does take some time, but I think once we link to the Office of Dietary Supplement database, we can also link to CDC and other databases. So that's all in the works. It will just keep growing, essentially. I can't imagine there's ever be an end to it.
That's what it sounds like. Another one, I think this one's for you, Kyle. Can you explain more about weaker support of ontology, and can you speak to how you choose ontologies? Do you see government as having a role on endorsing an ontology and or a data standard? I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Also, does an integration of ontology take a long time?
Yeah, so lots of questions in there. I'm going to answer as shortly as possible to give time for other questions. For weaker support of ontology, that was in regards to Neo4j. Neo4j and the type of graph database it is isn't synonymous with some of the ontology work that was going on, and some of the ontologies were built using other database technologies other than Neo4j. Since then, Neo4j, I think, has given a lot more tools and emphasis on how to take advantage of ontologies, such as the format that ontologies are usually stored in digitally. There are now things like import tools to help facilitate that process of integrating ontology into Neo4j that didn't once exist, I think, when we looked at this in 2020. For endorsing ontologies and data standards, it's always difficult for us to manage what we're using and how we're using it. In our case, we have an ongoing relationship for things like food on ontology and making sure that what is within that ontology works for the foods that exist within FDC. But it's always going to be interfacing with existing ontologies that are supported outside of USDA. Our ontology development is sort of building a layer of what ontology terms and definitions are important for Food Data Central. And from there, what we want to do is integrate with existing ontologies external to our system. We do this for a few reasons. One, which is we don't want to redefine terms that other people are already using. And two, that reduces the amount of time for resources and time in sort of mapping. We take advantage of the work that other groups are doing by interfacing and creating this sort of interface layer with those ontologies. And so hopefully that's a very, very short answer, but we could talk more about ontologies in the future and how we manage them.
Okay, thank you for that. This question was for both Kyle and Hande, but I see Hande has said that she'd like to answer it. Can you compare and contrast your respective food information systems? They seem similar and perhaps some of the same information. Does one specialize for certain types of information?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And as Kyle explained, while we're designing our ontology, we have been focusing on FTC. And as we like to say, a FTC webpage might not have all the information we have on our graph database. And when I helped the graph database to restructure some of it to make sure that we can integrate the ontology seamlessly when we're designing it, we will see some of this information that we design in the graph database and its structure in the ontology, but some of it won't be on the ontology. And as we develop them and as we clean them up and restructure them, we provide and we create different layers of information with different use cases for further analysis and downstream. I don't know what Kyle wants to add.
Oh, no, thank you, Hande.
And then I think we have just time for one last question. It's for Kyle. You showed the tabular format of the data available export. Will the edge and node tables also be available for easy download?
Yes, they will in the future, but if you would like it sooner than that, then reach out to me. We can provide you not only the Neo4j graph structure, which is open source and freely available, but we can provide you queries to get going.
Okay, well, that was short enough that I think we can have one more question. It seems to me that FTC is becoming a tool only for experts and there's no place for the rest of us. When are you going to begin to address this problem? We need USDA to remember its users who are not ontology or computer experts and to provide some help to us. We look forward to this.
I'm glad we got to this question because I wanted to answer this one live. It's exactly two components to Food Data Central. We got to consider where the research is and what we need to do for that. Colin's presentation was very good at sort of highlighting the advantages of moving towards that direction. But we do have a responsibility to our users. In that responsibility, it's also managing the multiple data sets that we have and the complexity of that. So some tools don't necessarily make sense for the entire data sets that we have and maybe only one particular one. And we're always sort of balancing this. The tools that we're developing aren't necessarily for the users that are just doing searches on our databases. It's providing these sorts of tools and resources so that the research itself can expand, that we can provide these as tools for other to conduct their research and move forward with their research and do interesting things with our data. But at the same time, we do want to make sure that we are trying to make sure that our tools, like making sure we still have the structured format available, making sure that we're providing searches that are important, which brings me to my last point, which is Our work here isn't necessarily to get you to learn how to use graph and ontology. It's that we're implementing a backend so that maybe we can develop tools that do make it easier for you. Be able to search a term such as iron and beans on our search and it understand what you mean when you say that. Today, you'd have to go to iron, search on iron, then it filter out beans or vice versa, and it could be very cumbersome. So taking advantage of ontology, language processing, and this graph database, we're hoping that as we move forward, we can actually work to develop tools that help link this data and actually make it easier for you to use Food Data Central. But regardless, please reach out on our contact form. We do want to hear back from our users and the difficulties that they're having.
Thanks, Kyle. And again, thank you to all the presenters for a really fascinating session.